Hey, what's up, everyone? I am Nick with Draftbit. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm super excited about our live stream today because I'm joined by Amie from MakerPad and Sako from Restep. What's up, guys? Say hello.
Hey,
Hello.
how's it going?
Awesome. So this provocatively titled live stream today is called "The Future of No Code is Code," and potentially some of you all us because you're like, what the hell are you talking about? And hopefully we can explain ourselves in this live stream. But before we do that, before we get to the exciting stuff, I just wanted to have Amie and Sako introduce themselves, explain what they're working on right now, how they got into the no code world, and what they're excited about. So Amie, why don't you give us your background?
Yeah, so I'm Amie Pollack. I head up educational content at MakerPad. I create our tutorials, work with partners like Draftbit, and run our cohorts that we recently launched. I've been in technology for over 10 years in different capacities. I think the journey to no code started with like working in a SaaS company, working with their Salesforce environment on like workflow automations and integrations with internal tools. And then I did freelancing for a while, helping people build out their businesses using no code tools. I didn't know they were called no code tools at the time. But then I was looking to create a mobile app for a trip, and I came across Glide. And that was kind of like my first intro into the no code space. And I started following Ben Tossel on Twitter, and he was looking for someone to do tutorials. And so I said I could do that. So I came on board to MakerPad part-time, and then went full-time about a year ago. I don't know, it's gone by quickly. But yeah, so I've always been passionate about technology. I like the no code space because I'm just optimistic about, it widening the point of entry to create a business, for people to try new things. It makes testing an idea, starting out a business less scary. And to this live stream's title, I think it offers a different avenue to learning how to code. Some people are motivated to code when they see "Hello World," and I think no code is like the equivalent. It's a different carrot. They build something quickly, and then they get that confidence boost, and then the next thing you know, they want to learn JavaScript or something. So in my world, it's really cool when people come in and they're saying, I'm non-technical, I don't know what a database is, and then like 2 weeks later, they've connected an API to this app, and they're starting to dabble in code. So that's kind of like my motivator, is to see that kind of transformation from like, what's the internet, to like, I'm going to take over the internet mentality. But yeah, that's me.
That's awesome. Yeah, no code as the gateway drug to code. So you came from the you were doing no code before it was called no code world. It sounds like. Is it anyone else who's watching give Amie a big wave or a amen for no code being in no code before it was no code? Cool. Sako, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Sarkis Buniatyan, and my friends call me Sako. I'm an Armenian entrepreneur by day, a product designer by night, and my passion in the last 10, 15 years of experience in the field has been to take my knowledge in the tech industry and apply it to underserved markets and solve problems that normally people don't really tackle, whether that would be agriculture, that would be the health industry, whatever it may be. I just feel like a lot of that knowledge and passion that we have now with no-code tools as well is just kind of going into specific sectors, usually the tech sector, more like Silicon Valley oriented kind of sectors. And my passion is like breaking it out. So, the majority of the world will start to adopt no-code tools and use it to solve everyday problems. So that's what I'm most passionate about. And my main issue with no-code has been that it's a lot of the websites or the projects that we see is really, we tend to box no-code tools into this website builder category. It's just for kind of building websites. And my passion is kind of breaking it out of that box and saying, no-code tools allow you to build anything. one day, and we're getting there so quickly. Just every month, Amie works at MakerPad, so she can tell you about how many tools come out, every month. This is really exciting, the landscape. And, as a designer myself, I got introduced to Photoshop when I was like 5 or 6 years old by my father. And, that was my passion, was I loved designing things. But then I realized very quickly, I can't really bring them to life without developers. So, you kind of become dependent on this whole other industry, this whole other sector. And if it doesn't jive with them, or it doesn't match up with their expectations, you can't really bring your idea to life, or it's really expensive, And now the idea that one person could sit down and build an entire project, or build an entire company potentially, within a few weeks is crazy. It's going to shift our entire understanding of what it is, what a startup is, what a product is. And I think now the important thing is for this passion to become more mature. This industry, this no-code industry, no-code, like Amie said, wasn't even a thing just a couple of years ago, So now that we know what no-code is, we need to define it very well, so that people who are entering no-code understand what it's for, what it's not for, and what the full range of possibilities are. And that's why I think we're all here for today. So I'm excited to talk to you guys.
That's awesome. I love that. This is a great place to start, by the way. Sako and Amie as well. Define no code for me. So someone who doesn't know what no code is, how do you explain it to them?
Go for it, Sako.
The simplest way for me is no-code tools allow you to interact with and manipulate code visually by clicking instead of typing. So for me, Webflow, for example, would be like a Photoshop for the web. It's even designed that way. You look at the aesthetics, the layout, the experience of Webflow, it's very much inspired by Photoshop. It's very much designed for designers, with designers in mind. So, a lot of these functions that normally CSS, JavaScript, and so on, that you would have to spend, hours typing, now you can just click a couple of functions and, get the desired result. So yeah, no-code tools are not a replacement for code by any means. It's just another accent. It's just another lingo. It's another way of interacting with code, and it's beautiful. It's visual, and I think it's kind of reminds me of the 90s when we had these debates about character-based interface versus graphical interface, and you had these battles. The character-based was how things were for many years, and then they're like, there's no way the graphical user interface can replace that. And then they finally saw it, and they're like, yeah, it's a no-brainer. Like anyone can just pick up their mouse and just do anything, in that visual screen, as opposed to having to type it. But there's a place for both. And what people need to remember is that no-code tools are built by teams of hundreds of developers. You will have to eventually, you will very naturally dive deeper into code by using no-code tools. It's like when you go into the ocean, you will eventually learn how to swim. So, it's just how it is.
That's this idea of no code is code, I think, is like a little bit maybe not controversial, but it's like it makes you sit up and say, well, what do you mean by that? So Amie, you tweeted a very interesting take, which I'm going to put on the screen in a second here and share it with our audience. But you have an interesting take, because you said that there's a distinction between tools that provide visual interpretations of code versus translations of code. So what did you mean by that? Sako just said no code is code. It's a paraphrase, right? What did you mean by this?
Yeah, so it's still like, I could probably get like tongue-tied trying to like go down this rabbit hole, because it is like a very slight distinction, interpretation versus translation. But, I talk about tools all day. People are constantly wanting to know the best tool to do this, best tool to do that, what's the landscape. And I try to always put it like on a spectrum of like, well, like easiest to most complex. Out of the box, like you'll have a amazing looking product in 5 minutes. This one might take you 3 weeks. And this one will have limited customization, and this one you can kind of do more like bespoke ideas. So I try and like communicate that to people, but also there tends to be especially when people are just starting out in NoCode, they're overwhelmed by like a Webflow or a Draftbit or Bubble or Builder. And it's because of how they are, they're kind of using, or kind of following standard code conventions. You're not kind of like masking, like, you know, padding and margins, and you're not necessarily requiring people to write like the full line of code, but you are kind of asking people to at least loosely understand the concepts. And so I started viewing those tools as ones that are translators of code. So you can still, you dabble, but you don't have to, the burden on you to like know how to code isn't as strong. But you, at the end of the day, if you wanted to take your idea elsewhere, you can, because you can export the code. So that's another layer of it. So a lot of people want to know what the runway is on a no-code project. You know, what happens when I get 1,000 customers or 1,000 users, and like where do I go after I've reached the limit of this tool? And I think that's when you want to start looking at these tools that are more like visual development tools versus no-code tools. Whereas there's some platforms that make it very easy to get like a mobile app or a website and stuff, but if you were to strip your code away from that, it wouldn't work. And so I think there's just this new divide in the market of tools that are, like I said in my tweet, like they're interpreting code visually, and then there's those that are translating it. So like with Draftbit, you know, you can export your source code, it's production ready. Like that's really powerful when you're building a business and like you're building something that you want to scale. And so I guess that's where it stemmed from, was just starting to think about tools in these two different categories. I don't know if that made any more sense in the tweet, but yeah.
Yeah, it makes a ton of sense to me. I guess, you know, so a classic example of this, and I think Draftbit follows this model, is Webflow, right? Webflow is building production grade HTML, CSS as you're building visually. So I guess when you talk about it conceptually, right? Like, why wouldn't you want the product that you're building to be backed by real, you know, exportable open source code? But like, there's definitely drawbacks, right? Like otherwise, like everyone would use Webflow or everyone would use Draftbit. But you know, Amie, you kind of started out talking a little bit about understanding trade-offs between tools. So like maybe what are some of the drawbacks of using or maybe like onboarding yourself to a Webflow or a Draftbit or some of these more you know, complex tools?
I just think a lot of people, they think of no code as easy, and it is easy in some regards, but that doesn't mean it has to be like quick. And so like a benefit of no code and these tools in this space are that like you can create an app, you know, in a day. You could create an app in 3 months. You can create an app in a year. It depends on what you're creating. And like, that's still quicker than you sitting down and having to learn like one programming language, 3 programming languages. And so I try and just like, if people want something powerful, they're going to have to go with something that's a little bit more scarier to work with. So like if someone's starting off with Card and then they move to Webflow, they're like, whoa, like I can't do this. And the problem really is just that they can't create a good looking website likely in like an hour. But like no code isn't supposed to just be this thing that like creates everything in an hour or like 5 minutes. It's just supposed to lower the barrier a little bit. And so I think it's just, you know, if you're going to start building website in Webflow, or if you're going to start building in Draftbit or Bubble, like you're just going to have to prepare yourself, but you're going to have to do a little bit more heavy lifting on like the knowledge that you need to like create this thing. You're going to have to think more through like the data flows and stuff. But I think that's still like a low cost compared to hiring a developer or taking the time to learn how to code. And all you know is, you know, loose concepts and have nothing to show for it.
Yeah, I love that perspective. So speaking of building like very powerful things on Webflow and tools like this, I feel like this is like a natural alley for Sako. So Sako, you built one of the most impressive things that I think anyone has seen on Webflow. Whoops, I'm gonna get my audio's on here. You recreated Civilization 6 on Webflow, which is not as I understand it, doesn't have a game engine, and is not really meant for these things, but very clearly, like, you built something on Webflow that was super, super powerful. So I was wondering if you could just tell us a little bit about kind of your journey to learning Webflow, becoming really one of the probably foremost experts on how to build amazing things in Webflow. Like, for folks who look at this and say, like, oh, Sako makes this look easy, help us understand a little bit about your journey to this place where you built this amazing thing. And maybe, like, for folks who are looking to take the step into more powerful no code or low code or pro code tools, right? Maybe just talk about your journey to this place a little bit.
I appreciate it. And, you know, my work is inspired by so many other incredible Webflow projects that inspired me over the years. I got in to Webflow, particularly in 2015, 2016. Really started to take it more seriously when I saw some of the potential, I saw the projects that were coming out of it. Before that, it was a little early. I still wasn't sure if it was trying to go against Squarespace or was trying to compete with Wix. I wasn't really sure what Webflow was supposed to be at that stage. But in 2015, 2016, it was already serious business. It was very interesting to see the potential. And my other frustration with no code is that just the sheer saturation that we're dealing with right now is, you know, you don't really have to sift through a lot to find these, you know, types of projects. So for me, the reason why I went public with my work and I started getting deeper into Twitter in January last year. Before that, I wasn't using Twitter really at all. I'm very private with my work. I realized that developers and the general public in general just didn't take no-code tools very seriously. They thought it was a gimmick. They thought it was just another website builder. And so I was like, all right, fine. Well, what can I build that could really demonstrate the full potential of these tools? So let me build something that, you know, would take a normal team, you know, there's a team of 100, 200 to build. You know, let's take something like that and put that into your browser and let's see, you know, what they say at that point. And the reaction wasn't, how did you do this in Webflow? The reaction is, how did you do this at all? And that was the point of this prototype, was to stop talking about no-code tools. It's not about no-code. It's about the end product. Well, how did you get there? You know, if I used Webflow, it's fine. You know, like, isn't it interesting when you look at a poster, you don't say, wow, the Illustrator work was just done amazing. Like, it's amazing Photoshop work right there, you know, Figma work right there. You know, you don't think that way. You appreciate the product. But it's funny, when we release a no-code project, we immediately be like, that's an amazing Webflow project, or it's an amazing whatever. You know, so I kind of wanted to build something that transcended those arguments and those discussions. And the reason that project is so heavy, I realized earlier you wanted to open up the prototype, and it was taking a while. The reason it's so heavy is because all of it is running on one single page. That was the other thing I wanted to demonstrate, was that you can really bring the heat with these projects now. You know, like just with Wix, you know, you try to build a traditional landing page and it takes forever to load. You know, like, so what are we talking about? And then you open up Webflow and it's just, you know, it fires the cannons. So it's exciting to see that no-code tools are offering that potential. And this kind of gives me a little segue into, well, what is no-code for? Like, you know, we bring up these prototypes and these examples, and then someone joins, like Amie I'm sure can attest to this, is how many people reach out to her or tweet about, well, what tool should I use? Or, you know, how should I approach this? Well, the first thing is, let's not ask ourselves which tool should we use. Let's ask ourselves, what are we creating? And why are we creating it in the first place? Like, is it actually solving a problem? You know, and then you can go figure out how to get to that problem, you know, solving that problem. But it's more like we're doing it the other way around. We're figuring out what the tools are, and then, well, what can I build with this tool? You know, and so this is why I say that even though it's become easier to build, it's actually become harder to build a product, because now you don't have the luxury, if you will, of a whole team. You know, with the team, you have the synergy, you have the back and forth, you have deadlines, you have, you know, something you're working towards, you have revenue you have to worry about, you have investors to worry about. That might seem like, okay, that's a lot of hard work, but you have to realize, without that kind of discipline, you don't really build meaningful products. So just because one person can sit down and build Civilization, that person didn't actually build Civilization the game. That person built the UI UX of Civilization. So, you know, it takes a whole different level of discipline to build a full product. So I think there's this assumption, which I feel is completely wrong, that, you know, just because I can hit the publish button, I'm a creator now. It's like, no, you haven't created anything yet. You're still testing your skills. You know, so many times, like just recently, I've been noticing more and more people, they, you know, get to that finish line, they're excited to launch something, and then they put a price tag on it without considering, like, you know, this is $100, this is $300. I've been seeing prices that are just astronomical for, you know, it's just like, because it was so easy to build, let me just put that, you know, just tag it that way and just sell it now. And I'm like, well, that's not how it's done, sir. Like, you know, if you're building a product for mainstream, you're releasing this, you want to charge people for it, it requires a whole different level of thinking. And I feel like NoCode is missing that education. We're just talking about how to learn the tool, not how to actually use that tool to build a business. And that's where I think these kind of discussions are so important. And then finally, in terms of what NoCode tools are for, I think it falls into primarily these 3 or 4 categories. One is it's a showcase website. It's a landing page, an e-commerce website, things like that. It's perfect. NoCode tools are just phenomenal for things like that. You know, you should not be spending 50 to 100K, you know, go building your basic website. You know, like NoCode tools, you can do it yourself or hire someone to help you build it, you know, and teach you how to manage your own project. That's the real benefit, I think, when, you know, a designer, someone said, well, why do designers charge 5K or 10K? Like, why does FinSuite, for example, you know, charge this much? I'm like, you don't understand. What they're giving you is full control over your product. You could go just develop it, you know, on Fiverr for like $500, but that person, you have no idea how to manage your own project. They're gonna become dependent on these people. So yeah, showcase websites. The second is prototypes and MVPs. This is excellent for raising investment. I've personally raised investment using NoCode tools. So, you know, you can really demonstrate your vision. Something like Civilization, you know, for example, like if you were a game creator even, right, you could use NoCode tools to convey your vision for your game, which is excellent, you know, and show that to investors. You don't have to hire anybody. It's all you, you know. And you can also create MVPs. So Nick, I don't know if you heard of NoCode Mentors. That's something we launched last year with Quentin Villar in Paris. You know, it's a beautiful platform. And no investment was raised. It was a full platform with Calendly integrated. You know, you can get mentored by anyone in NoCode. You know, really simple tool, took only a few days to put together, but that can be scaled to 10,000 mentors just using Webflow. You can prove your whole concept and then go raise $5 or $10 million and build out your business. So again, it's a strategy. How should I use NoCode tools for what I'm trying to do? And then finally, you have this industrial level, this enterprise level where, you know, Amie was talking about that earlier, I think, you know, about exporting your code or you know, building your front end in Webflow, and then the back end could be somewhere else. You could have your own development team, you know, building out these services. And many development teams actually prefer that. They don't want to have to worry about typing CSS and dealing with the front end. So it's so much easier to just have the front end done in one tool you trust, you know, and then from there it goes even broader where you can build these entire, you know, like Clutch and Builder and some of these other really amazing tools that are out there. These tools are, they're visual development tools. They're not no-code tools anymore. Meaning, to kind of come back to your earlier question, Nick, like what are no-code tools? Like no-code, it has to be understandable to a layman. Someone who does not understand code should be able to use this tool. If your first question you're asking me when I open up a tool is, which API do you want to hook up? You're not a no-code tool. That's not the right question to ask, you know? So Clutch and Builder and some of these other tools are already realizing that, listen, we're a different breed of products. We're still visual, but we're not no-code. We're kind of what no-code graduates into visual development. So I feel like that's like another stage, and then full development is like the final stage when you already get a hang of these tools. So that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I love that. What would you call those tools then?
Visual development tools.
Visual development tools. Okay.
Because you're still developing, but you're developing visually, and you still have to understand development lingo. You still have to understand
what's a variable.
Yeah, exactly. What's a backend? Yeah. You know, what's a lot of these code and code terminologies. That's why I think it's a viz dev, as I call it.
Viz dev. Okay. So is this what you meant? I just put something on the screen here. Is this what you meant by it's not no code, it's no code, KNOW code? You need to understand engineering concepts. Maybe you can teach yourself these things by using these visual development tools. Maybe you can learn some things about software engineering, but you really need to understand what an API is, what a client is, what a server is, things like that, in order to maximize your capabilities in a tool, in a visual development tool. Is that what you meant?
Absolutely. I think Amie and I will totally agree with each other on this. I mean, someone who understands code will be able to run circles around you as a no-coder. You know, the things they can integrate, the experiences they can create, you know. You could go and just hack a few things together, but someone who knows even the basics of code, of how how tools come together, how you can integrate them into one another, would be able to build a much better experience. You look at MakerPad. MakerPad has so many integrations, right? It's built with Airtable and this and that. There's so many integrations to build a MakerPad. But the knowledge that Ben and the team have, you know, to build tools is so much more sophisticated than, you know, just someone who's just entering NoCode or just building in Webflow, for example. You know, I don't even have that knowledge. You know, I stick to my tools. I stick to my guns. But ultimately, I think the idea that NoCode can separate you from code is a wrong way of doing things. It's just not, it's not appropriate. It's like saying, you know, I have a calculator, so I don't have to learn math. Well, I don't need to
Although
learn algebra.
I like that idea though. We should not have to learn math if you have a calculator.
Yeah, I have a calculator. It's a powerful calculator. It can calculate a lot of things. You know, it comes in white and black. You know, you get some customizations, but at the end of the day, like, you're still held back by what it's giving you, you know. And this brings us to another point, Nick, which is like, ultimately, I would not want to, if I was building a full business, like a company and, you know, a serious development stack, I would want to prove my concept using no-code tools, but I would never want to hand the keys to my entire kingdom to another company. Like, I would not, just because I can build an Airbnb using Bubble does not mean I want to build my Airbnb business on Bubble. Bubble does not let me export any of my code. You know, I don't have any control over my own experience, which means you don't know the back end of Webflow, for example. You don't know how it's actually structured. You don't know where it's actually going, which means that you don't even have the full roadmap of where this service is going to go. So you're completely trusting this third-party service to do the right thing. Or you don't even know how the code is actually stacked, what their stack looks like. So you're just assuming that because it's fast and it's easy to build, this is right for my business. But a serious company, you know, you have to have control over your own home. That's like saying, you know, someone built this house for me and they control the house. One day you could just get locked out for whatever reason. You know, when a customer has an issue with your platform, Amie, right, with MakerPad, do you just say, well, we don't know what happened? No, you have people on standby who are like, hey, we got to go into MakerPad, go figure out what's happening, you know? And that's the issue right now, is that a lot of these tools are amazing, they make it easy and so on, but they don't actually give you full control yet. So I think that we need to get to that point for no-code tools to really transcend being just, you know, for hobbyists, or being for that, you know, kind of like showcase level experiences.
I think one thing that's cool about like learning some of these no-code or visual development tools is like, at least, and I agree, like there are certain businesses, like just because you can doesn't mean you should with these tools, but it at least gives you the, like, you start to get like the technical understanding of what you're even talking about. Like if you were to go to a developer, you start to understand like what the data workflow like might look like, what the user experience needs to look like, and you can start talking about it in a more technical way than maybe you could if you just, I have this idea where people do this and do that. Like you kind of get a deeper understanding of like what this actually looks like to be built, and you can talk that lingo a little bit more. But like personally, I'm a huge, I call them power-ups, like code snippets and stuff, or like anything that allows you to inject code. I personally like dabble with like, I can understand code, I can't write it, but you know, like I have a Squarespace site, and the coolest parts about it are code. It's I've gone and like looked at someone's site, I figured out the code, and then like made it my own. And a little bit of code goes a long way. You know, Airtable has you know, scripts, and they have ones that you can copy, but if you can just learn like a little bit of JavaScript, you can create your own. and you just take in your automations and Airtable like to the 10x instead of just like this out of the box thing. So I don't know, I think people should, and like Super is a great tool. Like, you know, what makes a Super site cool is like being able to customize the code in their little like source code box. So there's benefits to learning at least just like little bits and pieces here. And this is like one reason why we worked with Code Academy to like write an article on like, okay, if you want to learn websites, like here's like what the NoCode tool, but if you want to learn the code for it, here are the languages. If you want to build a mobile app and you want to develop it for iOS, like here's the language you would want to start learning. And then with the idea of like, okay, once people reach that max with these tools, like where do they go? And I think that's why, like, you know, no code leads to code. It's because you end up circling back of like, how do I like deepen these skills? How do I take this further? And then that jump isn't as hard as going from like, I have an idea and then learning to write HTML or something. You're kind of more familiar with like that technical like know-how to be like, okay, now learning Swift or something or React is not so overwhelming because at least I know what I'm working towards now, and understand like what I'm doing a little bit more than just having this initial idea in your head. But
yeah, NoCode is definitely a great introduction, no question. And I think the tools are going to get more and more sophisticated, more and more automated for sure. But I think, you know, and George just asked, for example, says, well, don't you already have to trust AWS to do the right thing? What's the difference? And like, the difference is that AWS doesn't control all of the code. It doesn't control my whole stack. I can host wherever I want. AWS is just helping me, you know, I'm choosing AWS. But with Webflow, I don't control any of Webflow. I don't actually control their stack. I don't know how my website is actually built. I don't know how secure it is. I just have to go with it, and it'll work to a certain point. But I think even investors, at some point, they'll be like, well, great, you built it with no-code tools, it worked, but now you have to grow up. Now you have to, you know, build this natively, because we just won't hand that off to somebody else. And I have to agree with that.
Yeah, there's something that's kind of coming up in this discussion over and over again is this concept of, you know, commercial grade, venture scale, you know, like software that you think can become a big business someday, and the importance of owning your code and understanding your full stack from top to bottom. I want to put a pin in that for a second because I do want to talk about that. But first, I want to kind of go back to like the beginning of a software builder's journey. And Amie, like, you know, you're probably one of the few people in the world that has had, you know, thousands of these conversations probably where someone says, hey, I want to build Uber for NFTs, right? How do I get started? I'm not a software developer. I just have this really great idea. How do I get started? I'm sure there's like a bunch of questions that you ask them before you would ever place a recommendation on any particular tool or stack, but like how should someone who's just starting out in their software development journey, where should they get started? And I want to just reference back to a couple of weeks ago, we had an entrepreneur on this live stream who was building her kind of her market ready application in Draftbit, but that was essentially her V3, or is her V3. Her V1 was a bunch of stitched together Zaps and Airtables and chatbots and kind of like a Rube Goldberg MVP that helps her prove out the demand for what it was that she was offering. And then the V2 was built in an all-in-one no-code app building tool. And so V3 is being built in Draftbit. And so like, I was hoping, Amie, you could just talk a little bit about the journey to building your venture scale commercial grade application, and how people start out, and where you would recommend a beginner get started.
Yes. So I mean, with the cohorts and stuff that we're doing, it's like we try and teach like the fundamentals, and like we start off with kind of what Sako was saying earlier. It's like, what's the problem? It doesn't, like, forget about the tools. Like, what are you trying to build? Like, what are the features of that? What is the user journey? Like, figure out that first, and then map those needs to tools. A lot of people want to just use a tool, and they get like, strung out on like, I want to use Webflow, and it's like, well, Webflow is not built for that idea. Like, so you need to start with like what you need to build and what you want to build. And I try and encourage people to start with like, what is like because people get overwhelmed with like, they have this big elaborate idea of how this thing is going to work. And it's like, no, like pick 3 things. Like, what are 3 things that you need to get this off the ground, to test your idea? Like, what does that look like? And then think about, if this is successful, if I was right, what's the next version of that look like? What are the 3 things that you need to do to keep it going? And look at the tools that you like have looked at for version 0.5, and then look at the tools and see, do they support version 1.0? And you just got to figure out like, what do these tools provide, like the runway? And you also have to take into account like pricing. Like maybe the idea in this iteration doesn't justify the pricing of the tool that will get you to your like 2-year plan, and that's okay, because it's okay to just like, I see people build like a product hunt in Softer, and then they end up going to Webflow or something, and that's okay. It's like, you got comfortable, you kind of tested out some theories there of what you wanted, you got some ideas of how this needs to look, you sent it to a few friends and they gave you feedback, and then you realize that you reached the capacity of that tool, and so then you go and start building it again in Webflow. And so like, that's completely normal too, to like jump from tool to tool. But I think you just really got to focus on like, what is the thing that I can launch like next week, in the next 3 months, that can validate this idea so that I can keep going, and then figure out the tool for that. But I also tell people to like, look at all the tools that, like, if you need a website, look at 3-5 tools in that space. Look at the features. If you want to blog, like, you're not going to use Card. If you want a lot of like customization and animation, like, you should use Webflow instead of Squarespace. Like, you got to look at all those trade-offs, and people just want to know like, what tool should I use, versus like thinking about like the features and how they support the user journey and like the actions that you need. So that's where I would start.
So should those beginners come to MakerPad to figure out how to get started?
Absolutely.
No, they absolutely. MakerPad has been really helpful for me as well, and Amy's a brilliant teacher.
Thanks, Sako.
Amie, are you teaching this course? Is this your cohort course that I have on the screen here?
Yes, I teach most of the sessions, and Ben teaches a few, and he also like is on the calls helping out, answering questions in the chat and stuff. But it's been a cool experience if you're kind of overwhelmed. Like I said, like, we try and stay problem focused instead of tool focused. Like, if we were to teach every no-code tool, it would take like a year to run this course. But I think we try and instill the principle of like just how you build something, how to think about building something. And kind of like encourage people to think for themselves a little bit on that. So Sako, your Webflow project, it gets shared a lot as like inspo of like, where you can go with this and how far you can go with this. But yeah, and if people don't know where to start, like, and they want to build something, like, we just encourage people to build for fun. It's okay to just build something for fun. That's, a great way to come up with like an idea and stuff. So yeah.
I feel like it's kind of an opportunity to figure out, what you want your thesis to be about, or what you want to do when you grow up. No-code it really is an introduction to so many possibilities. It's not a surprise that there's a lot of validation going on. I just wanted to touch on one thing, Amie, is that you said, if you're trying to build a website, then look at the tools that would help you do that, and then decide what kind of features you need. I wanted to also make this distinction that if you're trying to just host your shop, you're trying to create an online store to sell something, you don't need to worry about a whole team. You don't need to worry about raising investment. You don't have to worry about owning all the code or any of that stuff. You actually want the company to take care of all of that. It's such a hassle, just get that out of the way. That's excellent. So it really is about defining like how serious is your business. You know, at what point do you have to actually think about these kind of concerns? But if you're at the early stage, you know, validate away. You know, to reiterate what my friend Dan Perry in the UK said, you know, startups are all about mitigating risks, and NoCode is perfect for, you know, understanding, validating them. You know, do people actually need this? And I mean, that's half the. I'm sure you're seeing the same thing in Draftbit. Was actually figuring out if people actually want this. Is this solving a big enough problem before I go invest or raise, you know, $2-3 million and then figure out, oh, this isn't actually what people wanted. So NoCode can, you know, save you a tremendous amount of time and a lot of pain and grief too. You know.
Right.
Yeah. One thing I forgot to mention real quick about like the entrepreneur that like started off like a bunch of like, you know, patchwork tools and zaps and stuff is like, that's another thing too to think about is like, I'm a big fan of using like one tool instead of like 3 or 4. I think sometimes people in the no-code space get like, they're really about the tech stack and the integrations, but like I am a big fan of just like, I use this one tool because it does everything I need. And that's like, you know, less headache for me. I don't have to worry about this tool, like getting rid of this part, this tool, getting rid of that part. And so like, you know, if there's a time and a place for it, like if you're constrained by like budget and stuff, like I could totally get that. But I think if you can find a tool that you know, you can use an API versus instead of connecting it with like Zapier and Integromat, like that's way better. If you can use a tool that has like, you know, 3 features instead of using 2 tools that have, you know, 2 features here, 1 feature there, like I would definitely consider that option.
Yeah, that's a great point. A framework that I always find helpful is I always think about it from a business perspective. In business, you really want to make sure that you own whatever is the core strategic offering of your business and outsource things that are not strategic. And so I like to ask people who come and say, like, is Draftbit, first of all, never ask the tool if the tool is right for you. Like, ask MakerPad. Like, MakerPad knows better than Draftbit which mobile app builder is best for you. But what I try to do is I ask, like, okay, well, why do you want native, right? Draftbit builds native apps. Is it because you want really tight control over the UX? Is it because you need access to device libraries, push notifications, camera roll, contacts, etc.? Is it because you want to leverage the app store's you know, built-in distribution? That distribution is key to getting your business in front of millions of people. Like, what is it about building for mobile and for native that you really need? And if someone says, well, actually, I really just want like an app, you know, I own a business and my business has 10 drivers and I just want something that's on their phone that allows them to do X, Y, and Z, but I don't care about the app store, I don't care about a bunch of these things, I'll say, you really should be building in Glide. You don't need to be in the app stores. All you need is a web app, and chances are this functionality, you don't care that much about a really bespoke UX. Chances are all this stuff is already covered by Glide, allow you to build faster and keep costs down. In the case of this entrepreneur that we spoke with on Draftbit office hours a couple of weeks ago, the delivery of the content that was bespoke to her business was so critical to be on a user's mobile device. And so, but she first had to validate, all right, is this content valuable at all? Which she did with her first stack. And then with her V2, this all-in-one mobile tool, she kind of validated, all right, it needs to be in this mobile format and it needs to be in app stores and people need to be able to sign up for it through the app store. So she validated the distribution strategy. Then and only then did she make the business decision to go with a you know, somewhat more powerful tool in Draftbit, because she had already de-risked the 2 biggest question marks in her business. Is the content valuable, and is the platform, does it have to be native mobile? So just kind of tying together what Dan said in the comments about de-risking your business, and which tool, think about these tools again as de-risking or proving out your hypotheses for your business strategy. So I just wanted to bring that up. I know I'm supposed to be asking the questions, not answering them, but that I think it's kind of a useful framework.
Well, I think
Yeah, for sure.
I think Lewis Carroll put it best, right? It's like, if you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. Like I just come into NoCode and there's a million roads. You know, it's like, well, I'm trying to build this. Great. Everyone's going to say they're the best tool for it, but you haven't had a chance to even understand the, let's say, the limitations. Let's just start with the limitations. Like if you don't know, you're not really sure what you're building. You know, eventually you might find out, oh, wow, Card actually doesn't have blogging capabilities. You know, or like, hey, Webflow actually only has a 10,000, which is a huge problem. You know, like, especially if you're building something serious, like you're really trying to scale this up into a giant community, 10,000 is nothing. You know, like that's a very small amount. So now you have to figure out, well, wow, I have to use Integromat. I got to figure out how to use Google Sheets. I got to do this Airtable integration. I got to do whatever to try to break out of this. You know, I'm very loyal to my tools, and I really appreciate Amie bringing that up, is that just stick to your guns. You know, being okay at 10 different tools doesn't match one person knowing Bubble really well. You know, and that's my point, is like, just be loyal. You know, Doc Williams, shout out to Doc. He does so much great content, you know, so many great videos, you know, about comparing different tools and how you can use them. And he still says, I still use my primary stack. I know all these tools, but I only use these 3 or whatever it is, because they're right for my business. And that's my point. Maybe start off by understanding, why am I even in NoCode? Like, am I a creator? Because the issue is, even when NoCode makes it easier, you will still hit so many creative blocks on the way to building your product that if you don't have a creator's mindset, you will crash. You will eventually cave into the pressure, or even worse, Nick, here's where it gets even worse. You will start to just go back and forth and change between ideas, and then tell me things like, well, you know, I'm launching 27 different startups this year. And I'm like, why is that celebrated in NoCode? I don't understand. Like, are we still trying to prove to each other that it's easy to build NoCode tools? It's easy to build with NoCode. We all know it's easy, but what are you building? Like, I still don't know what you're building. You know, so I think let's get to the core of why we're here. Let's pick a road.
Yeah. At the end of the day, you have to enjoy what you're building in. So, like, if you hate the experience, and like, you're not going to get very far.
Or if you don't have a vision for why you're building it, eventually you just give up after a week or two. It's like, oh, I launched it on Product Hunt and no one really upvoted me. I don't think this product is going to work. Like, do you realize that if scientists, for example, had that same approach to creating things, we would not have anything in this world. Like, nothing would have been invented. You know, after the 100th light bulb, you know, he would be like, nah, this is not working for me. The world doesn't need light bulbs. You're just giving up, you know? So, you know, eventually you have to have a problem worth fighting for. Why am I struggling in Draftbit? I want to build this thing. I really love this idea. You know, like, keep going. You gotta have some fuel. You know, just community hype is not enough. People patting you on the back and saying, liking your post, yeah, building in public is great. Build in public, wonderful. But have something to build, like, for a good reason, so we can get behind you.
All right. So with about the 10 minutes we have left or so, I want to return to this idea of, Sako, it looks like you ruffled some feathers in the chat when you said, you know, you have to trust the tools or trust the stack, and if you can't answer the question, where is the data and all these things, that might be a sign that you, I don't want to use a strong word like abandon the stack, but you, I think perhaps sometimes what is underestimated is, you know, if your source code is intellectual property for your business, if that is part of the strategic value of your business. We're not talking about Shopify stores, right? We're not talking about where the intellectual property is the product and Shopify is just a means to get your product out in the world. We're talking about, all right, I'm building software that is differentiated and unique in the world, and maybe it's venture scale or it's commercial grade. So I want to ask a provocative question, which is something like AWS, right? Is AWS, is that a no-code tool? Is that a low-code tool? Is that a visual development tool? At the end of the day, like, where does it stop? Like, you can't own the ones and zeros that your software is communicating to, the machines where your software is being run. Like how far down do you need to go and own, and at what point do you decide, like, okay, I have to trust AWS. I have to trust Amazon to serve my application, or I have to trust, Cloudflare. I have to trust some, kind of like the tried and true.
Managing code is different from hosting code. AWS cannot tell me what to do with my code. AWS is a service. I can host my work. I can manage my work. They don't own it, control it, and I own it. And I can choose at what level I work with them, at how our relationship needs to develop between, client and service. But I can't have that conversation with Bubble. I can't tell Bubble, you know what, I want to do this with your platform. I just have to use what they give me. And I think that this handing that's going on right now, that we'll just hand you what we think is best, how code should be developed or how websites should be developed, is lazy. Like it is for people who don't want to go down that path. I don't want to say that people who use no-code tools are lazy. Not at all. It's not about being lazy. It's about efficiency. But I think that ultimately, if you are trying to create a sophisticated tool or a sophisticated service, it is not going to be sophisticated until you own it, because you can't solve any of the problems that come with it. You can't actually dive into that code. You can't tell me or a customer that this is actually written the way it should be, that this is actually like our team manages this. You don't have any control over your own product. So I don't agree with that. And I think that's the stitching. Amie and I can agree on this as well. Is this patchwork, these products that come out, they're not safe. They're not the safest solutions all the time, especially if I just did that based on some videos I saw. Like if you really know what you're doing, you can ask Ben how long it took to actually build a maker pack. You can ask Connor Finlayson, how long it took him to build Unicorn Factory. It took them months. It wasn't some quick solution, but it feels like now the release schedule for no-code services is like, a couple of weeks. Someone released something on Product Hunt 3 hours after building it. It took him 3 hours to build it. It was already on Product Hunt. So I feel like the issue here is not, let's not encourage the community to build. The issue is, let's also worry about saturation and how we're going to be perceived by the outer world, that these are just hobbyists. They're not, because no one who's building a serious product would finish something and say, I'm done in 3 hours. It took people 6 months sometimes to just figure out the problem. And you're saying I went from problem to solution to design to launching in 3 hours. So unless you're Da Vinci, I don't know how you did that. You should teach us. I want to join that masterclass.
We're all Steve Jobs, right? So is the conversation no-code tools are shortcuts for building, but they're not shortcuts for solving problems. There's no no-code shortcut for customer discovery, user research, defining the problem, defining the ideal customer profile, and all of the other things that go, distribution strategy. Like no-code is not going to solve that for you. It will just help you build the solution faster.
Do you think of Excel as a shortcut? Do you think accountants think of Excel as a shortcut, or designers think of Photoshop as a shortcut? Yeah, it makes me design faster, but I don't think of it as a shortcut. I think of it as a platform where I work, I build, I create. And just earlier, George again brought up an analogy. He's like, well, what about control over the printer, for example? You don't actually control the printer. Oh yeah, I don't need to control the printer, but I control the content I put into the printer. I control the entire experience. The final printing doesn't actually matter that much. But comparing a printer to, let's say, a full backend system like Bubble, or comparing that to Webflow is not fair, because the reality is that I only control completely surface level. I only control the actual visual front end on Webflow. I don't control anything else in Webflow until I export it and I can have a little more control, but it's still not enough. I feel like we need to get to a point where you can build with no-code tools. They give you that full suite. We can stop thinking them as shortcuts and think them as efficient paths to what we're trying to build, as opposed to, it's just something that should get my website up and running really quickly.
I love it. So Alec just chimed in. He said, I feel that's a comparison that can't be made. Sorry, he's responding. I'm out of order here. George asked, what about Airtable? Are they no code? They control your data, don't they? Would you not consider it a no code tool? And Alex said that's an unfair comparison. They have access to your data, but they don't control it. You can
Yes.
take and export and use it elsewhere. So
it's
let's
a
talk
relay.
about
Yeah, it's a relay. I'm just I'm transmitting it from here to here. But that's all Airtable wants to do. It wants to service that relationship between the tools. But it's not telling you that this is how it's going to be. You have to use my architecture. You can't use anything else. You can use whatever you want. And that's the beauty of it. All these
So let's talk about exportability, portability. I would also lump in like reversibility. So as an example, I can host my application on AWS, but if AWS isn't suiting my needs, I can choose to host my application somewhere else. Is that the decision is reversible versus maybe making decisions to go down a path with a tool where it's not reversible, it's not portable. If I do decide to switch platforms, I'm basically starting from scratch. So Amie, I guess, like what's the maker community talking about in this realm? I hear portability a lot. I hear open source a lot. I hear scalable a lot. Like what are the biggest conversations that are happening in no code around these topics?
When I first got into this community, I come from like an enterprise software background where like I managed like all the like GDPR, like data privacy stuff for the company and like those relationships. And so like I care a lot about like security and data and like portability and scalability and like and reversibility. And it was weird that no one was talking about that. And I tried to, but like there wasn't a conversation really happening around like the security of tools and thinking about your data and thinking about like how they own it, how it's protected, how like what are like can they protect the people's data that you're asking for. But I'm just now starting to see people wanting to talk about it. People wanting to talk about open source. They want they want a portable backend. They want to be able to take their data with them if they want to move platforms, and it's like very important to people to have that control. I like Xano. Like a lot of people are like looking at that as a database, so they can just like plug it into like different tools. But I think also if you're building like an actual like there's people that are just like making and creating, and I feel like there's another bucket of people that are like actually trying to build like software companies on these tools. And I think you have to think about like, are they SOC 2 compliant? Are they GDPR compliant? Can I take my data with me? Like what is like, how do I get out of this if it stops working for me so I can go elsewhere? And I think that should be like one of your first evaluations of a tool in consideration of what you're trying to do with it. And so I think I'm just now starting to see people talk about it more and more.
So why do you think it is that you're just starting to see these conversations happening? Is it a function of the tools are getting better? Is it a function of the makers are getting further? Is it a function of more makers are teaching themselves software development concepts? Like, why do you think that it's just now that the maker community is kind of talking about these concepts?
Yeah, I think it might be maybe like makers are getting farther, and then also maybe there's just like a different a group of people that are like kind of entering the space. Like it's not just these like maker creator types anymore. It's people that are trying to bring no code into the workplace, or their companies that they're a team of people that are trying to go far with no code tools versus like a developer. And so they have to think about those things. So it just might be like there's now like different demographics entering this scene. But I don't know, I'm glad it's happening. I don't know why all of a sudden people care about open source as much and security, but I think it's a good conversation. I'm like, there's a million tools that launch every day and it's cool, but like you have to think about like like how are they hosting this data? What are they doing with my customers' data? It's 2 weeks old. Like I doubt that they have like the structure in place to protect it. So I think it's something people should think about it more, even though it's not a very fun or sexy conversation to talk about like data security. It's worth thinking about.
Awesome. All right, so we're kind of coming up on the end of this, but I wanted to do a little bit of a rapid fire with you guys. So like short-ish answers. I just have a few questions for you all to wrap it up. The first is, what's your like boldest prediction for 5 years from now, no code category? Whoever wants to start can start.
Me and Amie are staring each other down like two cowboys at I think that in the next few years, we're going to be creating and deploying complete software suites using no-code tools, real software, not just, like I hack together something, or I have this backend here and this other thing over there, like this patchwork. No, you're going to have full, real software. And the reason I say that is because I've already seen it. Tools like Clutch are just pure magic. I mean, just recently, Clutch, they're testing it right now. It's already in alpha. Like their ability to import, to just literally copy your entire artboard in Figma and just paste it directly into Clutch, and it converts your entire work into React components. It's incredible. Like, when real code, like real something real you can use, and the fact that these tools also let you plug in with any kind of database and also export the entire architecture as it is exactly what I think visual development is about. That's where it's going to go. And I think tools like Bubble and that don't at this stage, I'm sure Bubble will in the future. I'm pretty confident about that. But tools that don't let you have portability will disappear. They will not stand a chance against these other tools, because like Amie said, my customers can have 100 questions for me and I probably won't be able to answer any of them if I don't have that portability, if I don't have that control over the service.
Certainly a bold prediction. What do you think, Amie?
I don't know. Off the top of my head, I'm curious to see what happens now. There's all of a sudden there's starting to be no code tools pop up in like the Web 3.0 space, and I'm just kind of curious to see what happens, like if people still stay and double down in this like Web 2.0 world, or if there's like going to be like this jump to where people don't care as much about building no code for 2.0. They want to start doing it in like 3.0 world. So I don't know. I think that'll happen sooner than 5 years, but yeah, that's what I'll go with. Okay,
love that. Final, well, actually 2 questions. One is like final salvo, or what do you want people to take away from this conversation about no code and code? Like what's kind of the conclusion that you hope folks draw from it? And once you give me that answer, also I would like you guys to plug whatever you would like to plug, and I will share that on the screen as you're talking. So Amie, why don't you go first? What's the conclusion that you hope folks would draw from this, and what are you plugging?
The conclusion is just like there is no like no code versus code. It's like we're all on the same team here. It's like no code is I mentioned this yesterday on Twitter. Like no code is just a further extension of machine code, and it just provides accessibility. And so if you want to create something, go with no code. Use it as a launching pad to understand code, because like code is eventually what will take you the furthest. And then my plug is for our cohort launching next month. If you are overwhelmed with the landscape, if you need help thinking about how to build, if you just want to put in the reps on building something, join us. It's fun, great community, it's accountability, and I'm fully accessible through these 5 weeks to help you build and understand and launch something. So yeah, join us.
Awesome. Sako, you're up.
Well, thank you for having me today. It was very exciting. I always love talking about code and relationship with no code. This is definitely the future. Just seeing the last decade, how easy it's become for people to launch entire businesses with these tools is really inspiring. But you'll notice that the difference between those people and, let's say, hobbyists or people who are just getting into no code is that they entered no code with a vision, with a purpose, that this is really where I want to go with my life. And then the right tool found them. they started to build relationships with these companies, and they understood the limitations. And that's how they were able to build this kind of like the correct patchwork, if you will, for their business. You know, Ben has been inspiration with the community, for example, with MakerPad. You know, like he was able early on to recognize that, hey, we need to build an educational resource, a hub for the community. So what kind of tools would I need to do that? So having that purpose will make it so much easier for you to find your tools and to find the right community. That's another thing. Like there's an amazing Bubble community, amazing Webflow community, and amazing Draftbit community as well. So, you know, just know where you're trying to go, and you will find the answers to your questions much faster. And I think the real magic of these tools is that as they become more efficient, they will introduce you to a higher level of understanding of how to build products. I think that that's the next evolution. That, you know, another prediction, if you will, a bonus prediction is that Webflow will no longer just teach you about, for example, how to do Webflow. It'll also teach you how to use Webflow in particular scenarios. Like, I want to use Webflow for e-commerce or to build my storefront. Great, we'll teach you how to do that. Join this course. You know, like, we want to help you understand what these tools can do for you in day-to-day, in daily life. It's not just about, it's just our tool, here's the tutorials, and we're done. We have nothing else to talk about. I think these tools have a big responsibility, especially Webflow, considering that, you know, Vlad and the team introduced the term no-code in the first place. You know, like they dropped that bomb on us. Well, you know, you got to finish the story. Where are we going with this? You know, like, you got to bring it full circle. And then for a personal plug, I'm launching Restep.io this month. It's been, we've needed a couple more months to just iron things out. But the idea is very simple. The idea is that, you know, I've seen over the months, over the years as a product designer, that people just have a really hard time learning. Learning has to become much more automated. So Restep does something very simple. It allows you to record as a maker, not a video, but to actually record all of your clicks, all the functions that you do in your screen, whether you're building a Webflow website or a Draftbit app, whatever you're doing. It records all of it. And then in one click, you can share your entire Restep, if you will, this collection of steps. And you, in one click, Amie, for example, could repeat those hundreds of steps in her device, not by just watching it, but by literally Restep taking over her device, taking control of her mouse, and just doing it for her. So we have two modes in Restep. One is build mode and one is learn mode. Building just does it automatically. It just runs all those steps in seconds. And you can just see in the background right now, you can already see in a slow mode form how it's already implementing this. So this is real time. You know, it's showing you how, you know, this photo masking effect, for example, is being built. And then in build mode, in learn mode, Amie, I would love to work with you on this and work with MakerPad team, is you can actually annotate each one of those steps, and then the user can click one by one over each step. So now they can read, they can also listen to if they like, they can watch a video if they need to, and automatically they can not just look at everything that's happening, or it just happens too fast and can't keep up with it. You can actually know exactly what's happening, and it can indicate where you need to click. So the way you build and learn is going to be so streamlined that after that, it's going to be very difficult to go back to, let's say, just a static article, or, you know, just watching a traditional video. Because the thing is, there's so much room for error, Nick. I mean, I'm sure you've noticed that as well in your community, is that, you know, you explain it really well, you put it all the time in the videos, and then they still make all the mistakes.
Still not enough.
Stopping it and going back and forth. They no longer have to do that. So I'm actually very excited to release it this month and get both of your feedback. And thank you, Dan, for your kind message.
Yeah. And Sako, I think it's an awesome tool. I'm excited. When you shared it a few months ago, I was like, yes, please sign me up. So I'm excited for the launch.
Yeah, I definitely echo what Amie just said. Not only do I want to use the tool, but I also want to know how we get Draftbit on there. So
I love that. Thank you. Oh, and by the way,
right.
just ironically, just before we go, you mentioned architectures and how, you know, we were talking this whole, it kind of comes full circle, because automating Webflow itself, just Webflow alone, where Restep can now understand what you're doing. When you click, it knows what you're clicking. Just automating that has been such a nightmare for us, which is why it took us an additional few weeks, Amie, and we didn't launch it when we were supposed to, is because even just looking at the back end and taking a peek, we realized that it's actually super messy. Webflow doesn't ID things correctly all the time. You know, some features are identical, but they're almost like built by two completely separate people, like two separate different platforms. So you're not even able to get the IDs correctly from these architectures. So this is why a good example of like, hey, Restep is a company that wants to build with Webflow and it's not able to because we don't actually know the system. So I think that no-code tools will become so confident as they go along that they will eventually just open it all up and say, we're a powerhouse. You can do anything with us. But now we're still a little protective. You know, there's still this fear that someone might take my idea or, you know, someone might look at our code. And I think once we get over that, you know, I think no codes will really unleash its full force on the universe. So I'm very excited for that.
That's awesome. All right. And on that bombshell, Amie, Sako, thank you so much for joining me today. I learned a ton from you. I'm super excited that you are part of this amazing and growing no-code community. If you all that are still watching, give them a hand, virtual hand, no-code claps. Make sure that you share what you learned today on social media. Shout out Amie, shout out Sako. Link this live stream, any of that stuff. I think that the things that we talked about today deserve lots of people hearing what these folks had to say. So thank you guys again so much. And I will see you on the Twitterverse.
Yeah, thanks, Nick, for hosting, and good to see you, Sako.
Thank you. Likewise.